Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. I think 300 to 350 miles of range is plenty. To be honest, I've never had a car with that much range in my life. Yet I had to go every week to a service station to fuel up this car. About 5 minutes of my time. But obviously always a major hassle. And, of course, an expense. All compared with simply charging in the convenience of your home. I mean, if you could fill your gas car up from home too, you'd also prefer that. These are just some of the added benefits of an electric vehicle. Now, 350 miles is 563 kilometers. Wow, that is a great range on an ICE car. The best I've ever had is about 400 kilometers, or 250 miles. Yet I accepted it and lived with it. Sure, I could have got a hybrid with twice the range, but I'm willing to tolerate this extra hassle in order to have a high-performance European car. But of course, you don't have to compromise in a Tesla there either. There is nothing more higher performance than a Tesla anyway. So to me, having that much range would be amazing. However, when we talk about range with EVs, it's not the same as range with ICE. In fact, they mean different things. A range for an ICE car comprises of the efficiency of the engine, e.g. miles per gallon, and the size of the gas tank. The longer range you have really means the less regular you need to have to stop at a gas station. For example, you could probably drive just about anywhere, even if you had an ICE car with a 100-mile range. But not so much with an EV, due to the fact there are so many gas stations everywhere and not so many charging stations. With an EV, there is no hassle of having to stop at a service station once a week. You simply plug it in, which might take all of 15 to 30 seconds, and you don't even have to do that every day, perhaps every few days depending on your driving habit. And most people will rarely drive over even 50 miles a day, let alone 300 miles. Therefore, range on EVs is all about distance between charging stations for when you need to do long distance driving. For example, if there was always a charging station within a 100-mile radius everywhere in the US, then they would only need 100-mile range vehicles. Okay, sure, a little more than 100, as you don't want to drive your car from a full to empty battery, and also want some leniency too. But 200 miles of range would likely suffice for almost all driving if this was the case. Now, with Biden talking about 500,000 fast chargers across America, well, America has a land area of approximately 3.5 million square miles. However, Alaska accounts for about 500,000 of that land. So remove Alaska from these numbers and you're left with a land area of the contiguous United States of around 3 million square miles. Now, if you divide 500,000, as in 500,000 superchargers, into 3 million, then you're left with the number 6. In other words, if Biden did manage to achieve his 500,000 fast chargers across America, they would average 6-mile radius each. Of course, we need more chargers in denser populations, and we have charging stations that have multiple chargers. But still, with that many chargers, range anxiety is a thing of the past, and thus consumers can accept cars with lower ranges. In other words, 300 miles is likely ample by this stage. Like I said, look how there are gas stations everywhere. Eventually, there should be charging stations everywhere just as popular. Of course, a lot of these gas stations might even just transition to a charging station within time anyway. The majority of the profit from gas stations comes from the customer purchases in the shops, not the sale of the actual gas, due to such low margins. Except with EV charging, you have potential customers hanging around for 10 minutes looking for something to do, compared to a gasoline customer standing by their car whilst he fuels up. It's also a specific target market for these stations. If a lot of supercharger users are only using it because they're on a long road trip, then it would make sense to offer all these consumers items that could facilitate their trip. There are about 170,000 gas stations in the US that have to cater to every fuel efficiency. They also have to cater to all the demand. You see, every single ICE driver is dependent on going to a gas station due to the centralized system of refueling. But due to the decentralized energy recharging an EV has, the driver is not dependent on service stations, or obviously charging stations. Okay, sure, some people can't charge from home, but most can. This means you do not necessarily need so many charging stations as you do gas stations, as the drivers are less dependent on them. They're mainly necessary for long distance driving. Therefore, a city may not need a lot of superchargers for its residents, but more so for the people who are driving to and through the city for long distance driving. Once the infrastructure has matured, this would be what is referred to as ubiquitous. But this is just fast chargers. There could be perhaps another million or so chargers that are not fast. The point I'm trying to make is that it will not be long until 300 or so miles of range in an EV is simply enough. What does that mean for Tesla then, as their battery technology improves? Well, what if we've decided 300 to 350 miles is sufficient for 99% of EV sales, and Tesla could leave that niche open to another EV manufacturer that simply specializes in very long-range EVs? Perhaps it would have optional battery pack you can apply to double the range, so you don't have to always drive around with it. Or maybe it could just be a trailer even, that contains a larger battery supply that you're able to charge from when you need extended range. Perhaps the trailer could also act as a solar sail too, particularly when stationary, you spread it out and reach a reasonable area to get enough sunlight. On the other hand, it may be more feasible to have a trailer with a generator and gas tank. Now, as Tesla improve their battery technology, they won't be looking at simply adding the new technology in addition to what there is already. For example, if Tesla improves their batteries so the range will improve by 10%, and the range goes from 350 miles to 385 miles, well, we've already established that 350 miles is ample. So I think Tesla would simply use 10% less batteries and offer the same range. Or perhaps increase the range a fraction, perhaps to 355 miles, as it's always a good look for the company to be progressing. But either way, you get the point. What this means for Tesla is they will continually have to use fewer and fewer batteries as time goes on, thus reducing the cost significantly, as batteries are the single most expensive item in an EV. It will also continually save weight, improving the performance and handling of the vehicles too, but of course improving the cost of the cars as well. If Tesla reduces costs, then they increase margins, and if demand starts to fall slightly, then alternatively, they can use these new cost savings to drop the price of their vehicles and then increase demand again, likely keeping the price around the market clearing price where supply meets demand. Of course, it's a car though, and the shape of Teslas are not going to be updated, so sales usually dwindle over time as cars get older, except Teslas are continually updating. Okay, sure, sometimes there are updates with new hardware that do improve the vehicles, but mainly the update is in software, which means not only are the prices eventually going to come down a little, well, the features of the car are also improving at an equally impressive level. Tesla are going to continually keep offering more car for less money, therefore demand should always remain high. Usually, the real threat of losing demand is competition entering, but there is no company in the world that has the resources now that could ever go head-to-head with any model of Tesla. If any competition want any chance in the EV industry, then they need to find a niche somehow. Therefore, Tesla's demand should remain stable, especially when they're also likely the only car that offers FSD, which literally gives them a monopoly on self-driving cars. And assuming you value your time more than about $5 an hour, you'll probably want to have a car that drives itself. The major issue is that Tesla had to do all this in reverse, by which I mean they had to launch the cars with the longest ranges first, but whilst they were still the inferior technology. This is what was so hard initially, to give EVs enough range due to insufficient and no charging network, yet still managing to have a car that was practical enough for most people's everyday driving. This made it extra tough at the start, but Tesla slowly rolled out the supercharger network to eventually allow more application with EVs and long-distance driving. You see what I'm saying, right? From here on in, the charging infrastructure will only improve, making it less necessary to have longer range EVs. But it just happens that at the same time the technology has improved so much that although we are capable of making much longer range EVs, it's simply not necessary, and instead we just save on batteries. Really, if you don't care too much about performance, I bet a 30 to 40 kilowatt hour LFP battery would serve about 95% of all driving. Oh right, but we want robotaxis. We can't have these charging all day long when there are passengers out there waiting to be picked up. Well, there will definitely be more busy times of the day when robotaxis are required, like rush hour. In between those times, the robotaxi fleet could systematically all recharge. In addition to that, obviously charging is only going to get faster too, so it may only take about 5 minutes to charge if necessary. Remember, so much of how we look at Tesla is where we see the company and industry today. But inevitably, there'll be a lot more chargers rolling out over time. Cheaper, more dense batteries will come. This is really how you should look at the company. We're still very much in an embryonic stage with EVs. What is it, about only 2% of auto sales are EVs still? Well, just think how different the world will be when we get to just 20%. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.